Okay, so we are live, and as soon as my sister's Keto gets on, I'm going to invite her in. Hi, Iani. Oh, and there you are, my sister's Keto diet. Okay, so let's get this going. Okay, is it working? Hey, wow.
Hey.
Wow. So nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, I just happened upon your story listening to a podcast. I can't even remember the name of the podcast, but it was, it was a really interesting one, and it gave me just, a whole new perspective. And so I just wanted to hear more about you. I mean, the thing that struck me most was you said something about being like the big sister and wanting to help other people, through this. And I think that's it's so important because, doing the keto diet is it's so foreign and so different. It's not so complicated, but you have to totally, unravel everything that you thought you knew. So, so I'd love to hear, how did you, decide to go ahead and do something totally crazy and totally off the wall, and then get into leading other people?
Well, so I had heard I had a friend. I used to do every diet known to man, every exercise group that I could get into, every gym, everything. And one of the instructors, I went to a mixed fit class. It's kind of like Zumba dance, it's work fitness. And she was telling me, she had heard of the keto diet, but it's so dangerous because you can't eat fruit. It can't possibly be healthy. And I kind of took that and just kind of stored it in the back of my mind. And I was experiencing a lot of health issues, a lot of physical fitness issues that were so new to me. I had been in the military for 20 years, never had any health, any weight issues, anything wrong with me whatsoever, retired. And then it was like just a plummeting rock. My health, my fitness level, everything just to the ground.
Well, it's impressive you got out of the Army without having a lot of problems, because my brother is in. And, he has done all of these stupid things where he's like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. I just fell out of a plane and landed above my feet. Fine. Meanwhile,
exactly.
he's taking jugs of Advil, but, you can't tell him nothing.
Exactly. I went through air assault school. I've had all types of training. I've rappelled out of helicopters, everything. No problems. As soon as I sat down, it was like everything just broke in me.
Yeah.
And a lot of it I do account for psychologically also. I mean, because, when we look at this, it's not just what we eat or what we do. It's how we think also. So, and that was a part of my journey as well. But, I went to my doctor because I was having energy issues. My knees hurt, my back hurt, everything hurt. And he was like, you've got to stop eating carbs. You've got to stop. You're going to kill yourself. Yeah.
So your own doctor said that.
My own doctor said that. And so I went home and I jumped on YouTube, and that voice in the back of my head, that little piece of knowledge that I had stored back there, just right to the front. And so I started YouTubing everything keto. I Googled keto. And I don't know if you can see around me, but I have a bunch of books here. And this shelf that's closest to me is full of notebooks. I'm a big, huge nerd. I take notes on everything. So I grabbed a notebook and I just wrote down everything that I could find about keto, how to do it, how to get started. And there was so much conflicting information. And so I just started doing the things that made sense, right? So my doctor said, you got to stop eating carbs. So I was like, okay, what does that mean? And so I started looking up what constitutes a carb. And I think that there's a lot of narrative out there that keeps people confused about what we mean when we say carb. I hate when I hear people say, well, keto isn't healthy because you're supposed to eat carbs. Well, yeah, but when we're talking about carbs, we're talking about those processed foods. We're talking about the ultra processed things. We're talking about the candy, the cookies, the cakes, the pies. We're not talking about the veggies, right? We're not talking about the green leafies. So, just kind of researching everything keto, taking notes. And one of the things that I noticed was that there was not a lot of representation of all sorts. Most of the sources that I went to were white males. there was one Black female that I was following at the time, and early on in my keto journey, she actually had gotten pregnant, and so she stopped posting.
Oh no.
So it was like, you know, some of the, you know, it was hard for me to find a lot of representation in the beginning. Luckily now there are so many of our voices out there, so many of us helping each other, lifting each other up. And that is definitely an important theme in my life, because like, as I said, you know, I've grown up and served in the military my entire adult life for the most part up until that point. I have a younger sister who also was morbidly obese, pretty heavy. And it just, you know, I have lived my life in service. And, you know, this was, to me, this was an extension of that, because I'm no different from anybody else walking this earth. I'm 42 years old. You know, I'm not a spring chicken, you know. And it's like somebody has to speak up. Somebody has to say, okay, sis, you know, come on, we don't have to live this way. You know, we don't have to hurt all the time. We don't have to hold the world on our shoulders and do all of these things and not take care of our own physical well-being, our own psychological well-being too, because there are some links between some of the carbs and things that we eat, the sugar addiction and depression and anxiety. And we suffer from that at a higher rate than, you know, than we get acknowledged for. So all of those kind of things combined was like, you know what, let's be a voice out here. Let's put this out and see if anybody, you know, takes it. And lo and behold, you know, it was like people were like, oh, finally somebody is explaining this.
Yeah. Well, that's really awesome to hear, because a lot of this stuff is pretty complicated. And, you know, some of us who are more science minded or, you know, sort of interested in how the body works, you know, will take the time to try to unpack and understand what's being said. But then other people, you know, for whom this isn't really an interest are kind of like, you know, I don't get it. And, and that I see most specifically come out, you know, around electrolytes. You know, it's a little bit complicated to get. And I can't tell you how many people have been like, oh, you know, my blood pressure is high, so I'm not supposed to have salt, but I'm cutting out all of these carbs. And I'm like, you have to. Like, it's not a choice. So, yeah.
I have that conversation at least once a month in a lot of my boot camp groups. Look, all the processed food that we eat is full of salt, but if you're eating stuff that doesn't have ingredients, guess what? You're going to have to add that salt back in. Otherwise, you are going to suffer needlessly.
Yeah. And how do you deal with people? I mean, I feel like, you know, I kind of grew up my parents were hippies. And so I kind of grew up with this notion that, you know, food is health and the choices that you make around food are really important. And so, you know, therefore I've always thought about that. But I, you know, interact with other people who I feel like just never really put a lot of thought into what they were eating. And so, you know, rice is as good as, you know, Wonder Bread is as good as, you know, a donut or, you know, a handful of peanuts. And these are all like equivalent. And I'm just kind of like, you know, we can't even start with keto. You know, you're just starting now with like, what is, you know, why are we eating food? What is the purpose of eating?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is socioeconomical. I grew up, I did not have hippie parents. I grew up with, we eat whatever's on whatever on the table. You know what I'm saying? You know, and so, and part of that was, again, why I kind of started this was, look, guys, you know, I get it. You know, when you're 8 years old and you're eating candy, that's one thing. When you're 40 years old and your diet consists mainly of sugar and candy, that's something completely different. And I think that our people perish for lack of knowledge. You know, if we don't know, again, the difference when I say carbs versus when we're talking about cutting out carbs versus cutting out ultra processed foods, you know, even something as simple as white flour. I actually did a live broadcast about sugar addiction, and part of the way to beat sugar addiction was to cut out white flour because of the way that it's processed. And you would be surprised how many people do not realize that white flour and white sugar are processed in the same manner, and they react in the body in the same manner. You know, your body doesn't know, and this goes back to the fruit conversation. Your body doesn't know the difference between fake sugar and fruit sugar. It just knows, oh, I've got sugar. and it
Yeah, I
reacts in
don't
the
know if you
same
noticed.
way.
I posted on my Instagram stories a couple of days ago. I had a handful of sugarless gum, and I showed my blood glucose before and after, as well as my ketones. And my blood glucose went from 75 to 105, and this was with sugarless gum.
Right,
And I was
because
like, oh my God, gum.
because your body says, "Oh, sweetener, yes, we like it.
Yeah.
It's sweet." You know, blood sugar rises, and so just not and so back to your original question, that speaks to that knowledge of knowing how our bodies work. And when you don't have resources, you know, you don't have the luxury of making those alternate choices. And when you grow up like that, and you know, you develop those habits over time, it's super hard for 40 years to do one thing and then turn around and try to do something else. And so, you know, a lot of it, we have to be educated on it. We have to tell our people about it. And then we have to cut ourselves some slack when sometimes we fall a little bit short. Now, I'm not saying every weekend go out. And again, I have to say this every week to folks. I'm not saying every weekend go out and have a treat meal or a cheat meal or what have you. It's making the day-to-day choice. You know what? I'm going to do better than yesterday. So, and just having that knowledge that it is possible. You don't have to eat the white rice or Wonder Bread. You know, there are alternatives that taste just as good. There's so many, and again, there's so many resources out there. Once you start following somebody like yourself or somebody like myself, and we start introducing other folks, I have a couple of folks that I can think of right off the top of my head that they post recipes, you know, keto soul food and all kind of stuff. It's like, you know, there's information out there, so you don't necessarily have to go back through, you know, good old fashioned, you know, sweet potatoes filled with molasses and everything. Like,
and
there's
I
a better
like to
way
tell
to do
people, you know, soul food is, I mean, there's a lot of soul food that's keto all by itself, you know.
Greens,
so
hello.
Nothing wrong with collard greens and, you know, and like, I don't know, all kinds of stuff, all the meats that we cook, like all of this stuff is fine. And it's just like the mac and cheese and stuffing and pie, but you know, you can cut those things out.
Yep. And you know, last Thanksgiving, we had a keto Thanksgiving in my house. We tried some of the low carb bread to make the dressing, and that didn't quite work out as well as I had hoped.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, it was worth a shot. That, you know, everything else kind of turned out, but the dressing wasn't a hit.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to do something alternative with dressing last year too, and I was like, I just gonna let go of this whole concept of dressing. It's okay. There's a lot of other good stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, oh my goodness. You know what? I have to tell you this. I love your page, by the way. I think that it is fantastic because, again, representation is everything. And there are so many carnivore voices out there, but there aren't very many like yours. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it's just, I love to see it. It's just fantastic. So you definitely have a follower. I'm like posting your stuff like, hey, y'all, look.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a little bit, I feel like I'm definitely stepping out there a little bit into the void. It's definitely very different. My mom has stopped hassling me, but she still, you know, kind of frowns when she sees my plate. You know. But now I'm making such an effort to eat like organ meat and liver and other stuff that, you know, I can kind of say, hey, you know, you show me your broccoli, I'll show you my liver. Yeah.
And it's all the same stuff that we were, you know, our parents were trying to force down our throats when we were kids, right? Like liver and stuff. Like, come on, we know, you know, full of iron, full of the good stuff that our bodies need. You know, I appreciate the carnivore movement. I am a meat eater. I am not a vegetarian by any stretch of the imagination. For some of my older clients, I do tend to, you know, steer them a little bit towards some of the vegetables because of issues with rheumatoid arthritis and stuff and inflammation and things like that. But for some of my younger clients, I'm like, please get on it. Get that iron, because a lot of us, again, we're suffering from issues of fibroids and things like that. And so we need those additional vitamins in our bodies to kind of heal those processes. So,
well, that's actually kind of how I came to it, because I was, you know, I have endometriosis, and I have always been super anemic, and I've had surgery a couple of times. And I, at the time that I kind of started to go carnivore, I was having like excessive bleeding, and so my blood levels were so low. And, you know, got to the point where the doctor is like, well, you got to take iron pills, you know, eat red meat, drink blood, like do whatever you have to do.
Do what you got to do.
Yeah, and go get a transfusion. So, yeah, but, and right at that time, I happened to see something on the internet, the beef and butter diet, where you eat like a cup of ground beef, cooked ground beef with like 3 tablespoons of butter. And I was like, well, let me do this, you know, I was trying to take off a couple of pounds and everything. And like by day 2, I was like, oh my God, this is what my body has been crying out for. And that was it. I was done.
Same. I mean, again, my first week on keto, I think I lost 8 pounds, something like that. And I was like, I had never lost that much weight in one setting. The first month I ended up losing about 15 pounds. And I was like, this is it for me. And a year and a half later, I'm still here. I'm still 100% keto. No matter what, you know, a lot of people talk to me about emotional eating, and, you know, I haven't. Yesterday was actually my first post in about a week or two. Been dealing with some tough times here in my family, and you know, I tell people all the time, tough times don't last, tough people do. And so, you know, we have to kind of, and even in my post yesterday, talking to them about going beyond what we're feeling right now and understanding that we're going to need our health and we're going to need our fitness in order to, you know, once we get past whatever we're dealing with today, you're still going to need that strength on the other side. So, you know, no matter what you feel today, don't compromise your health over, you know, this happened, you know, so-and-so passed on, you know, this left my life, what have you. You know, we have got to still stay in the fight. And so, you know, as a soldier, that's my, you know, my inner mantra is I'm a warrior. I'm going to stay in the fight no matter what. So I'm keeping it keto, keeping up with my workouts. You know, to me, those are the, you know, the 3 important things that I've ever done in my life was to keep up with my nutrition, keep up with my fasting and my workouts, and just keeping the mind strong. So.
Well, actually, let's dive right into that fasting, because I'm really interested in that too. And for a long time, I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then finally, I was like, I've got to do this. So I'm now in my 5th fast. I've done 1 a week for the last, you know, now we're in the 5th week. And in the previous weeks, we did 3-day fast. This week, we're attempting to do a 5-day fast. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And but I'm really enjoying it. Well, that's a strong word. I'm getting used to it. And but I think that I do feel like I see some benefit for doing it. So tell me about your practice.
So when I first started keto, I also so in my research, I ran across some information about intermittent fasting. I'd heard of it, but it doesn't work if you eat junk when you, if you break your fast full of junk food. So, but I had heard of it. And generally speaking, most of us do intermittent fasting without calling it that. If you routinely don't eat breakfast and you know, your first meal is at noon and you stop eating at 8 p.m., guess what? You just intermittent fasted. Good for you, you know, kind of thing. And so I started learning about the process of autophagy in the body and your cellular rejuvenation, things like that. And I was like, I want this in my life. I was really worried about having excess skin because I did have quite a bit of stomach that I wanted to lose, my arms. I was starting
and how much did you lose overall?
I've lost 100 pounds and I've managed to keep it off. So my weight right now fluctuates anywhere between 149 and about 155, depending on what day of the month and all that kind of stuff. But I have been able to successfully keep it off so far. So
awesome.
Yes. But a part of that was, again, keeping up with my intermittent fasting. So when I started with the 16-8 protocol. So I would have an 8-hour eating window open, and then I would fast for 16 hours. And what I would do is once a week, because I traveled for work. And so during my travel day, which is on Friday, I would fast for 24 hours. So I would eat dinner on Friday and then not eat again until Saturday. or excuse me, Thursday, and then not eat again till Saturday because I traveled on Fridays. So that made it super easy. Now that I don't travel as much, even though my travel schedule is about to pick up here starting in 2020. So I'll be redoing that. So instead of fasting for doing a prolonged fast like that once a week, now it's more like once or twice a month. So maybe every other week I might do like a weekend fast or what have you, depending on my current schedule. I started intermittent fasting right away in my keto journey, which I generally don't tend to recommend that for people because it was hard.
Yeah.
I did real good battle with my hunger levels.
Yeah.
You know, and I try to explain to people that, you know, the thing about keto is if you're doing just strict keto or what have you, and you're able to, you know, kind of eat on your schedule and you're eating enough fat, then you're generally going to be satisfied. Yeah. However, if you are starting to fast, please understand that hunger is going to be a part of it. Okay. You can't escape the discomfort of hunger. Yeah. But I think one of the biggest things that people learned and that I learned out of this is that you can have control. You do have control. You do not have to succumb to it. You don't have to break. You can keep going. Yeah. You know, it's not like I never recommend fasting, you know, for weeks and months on end. You know, obviously, if you are having severe hunger, if you're feeling faint or something like that, you know, eat. It's fine. You know, make sure you're breaking your fast in an appropriate manner. But, you know, this notion that you're always going to be comfortable and it's always going to be easy. Well, come on, guys. Yeah. You know, that's just not reality. That hunger is a part of it. But again, as you kind of, you know, I've had clients that start off just with a 12-hour fast, and then, you know, each week they add an additional hour and they work their way up. And there's that sense of accomplishment where, you know, by the end of the time together, they're up to a 20-hour fast. They're like, Shereeta, I did it. Like, yeah, it's completely possible. Yeah.
Well, I feel like my first fast, I was really battling hunger. But every time thereafter, you know, I'm battling my mind and not my stomach. And, you know, and that is it's such a, you know, struggle. And so sometimes it's okay and it's not that bad. And other times, like, my mind is like, oh, come on. Yes. But it's never like a physical battle. And I have to remind myself, you know, I'm never hungrier than, you know, how I might feel 5 hours after my last meal. So, you know, I'm not ravenous. I'm not starving. There is no physical problem. I'm not dying.
Right. And, you know, there are ways around it, right? Even right now, I have my cup of black coffee here. It's just sitting here, you know, keeping me company so that when my stomach starts to kind of get a little rumbly, I take a few sips and I keep it moving. Keeping busy, you know, if most of us, you know, right now I'm taking classes. I'm working on my nutrition degree. So I'm not just a pretty face, but, you know, there's a little bit of something behind it, not just my experience, but, you know, a little bit of academic information as well. But keeping busy, you know, drinking our tea, keeping up with our hydration, things like that can also help. But also understanding, again, this is not going to be the crystal escalator up to our dream weight. You know, we got to take the stairs, baby. And sometimes it's a pain in the butt.
I love that. This is not the crystal escalator. There's some hard work here.
Got to take
running up the bleacher stairs. Yeah. Well, I actually, it's really helpful to hear you say that, because I feel like a lot of times especially when I'm like looking online at other people's videos, you know, they're just like, oh, you know, the fasting state, it's so wonderful. And I'm like, come on, it's hard.
All the
just
time.
acknowledge that it's hard.
If people tell you, and I want your followers to understand this. If someone tells you that they've never cheated, they never had an off day, it was all so simple, the weight just fell off, they are faker than a $3 bill. I promise you. Even the best of us, even the people, we got thousands of followers and, you know, folks is out here asking for advice. we have fallen off. I've had birthdays. I got a promotion at work. We had Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Like, we all have the same things going on. It's just the people that find success are the people that are consistent. You wear what you do every day. So consistency is the key. So staying as consistent as you possibly can, but understanding that human aspect of it. Again, hunger is going to be, we're human. So hunger is going to be a part of it. You know, something terrible happens in your life, and you know what? You might have to take a knee. You know, that doesn't mean give up all hope. That just means take a knee, take a breath, take a beat, and then get back on the horse and keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah. And I've had to reshape, you know, my mindset too about this stuff. Like, I ran for city council twice in, you know, here in New York, and it was a really challenging and really difficult.
Oh.
I did really well, but I didn't win. But, you know, I say to people, I mean, people are always to me like, oh, you know, my stress, my job, and this and that. And I'm kind of like, there's nothing more stressful than running a, you know, a campaign for government. And in the first race, I ate, you know, whatever happened to be around. And I prioritized sleep because, you know, I was like up and out and walking around and talking to people so much that I had to make sure I had enough sleep. Yeah. But, you know, I felt awful a lot, and, you know, it was hard to keep up. My next time around, 4 years later, I was keto. I had lost 80 pounds. And I have never been more perfect on my diet than I was that summer, because, you know, if I ate, and I had many bad days, so, you know, I surely had reason to get, you know, a pint of ice cream and sit down and eat it. But it would take me a full 24 hours to recover from, you know, being knocked out of ketosis and feeling bad. And I simply could not spare the time to do that. So I was more perfect. And actually, that was probably the closest I slid into carnivore that summer, because it was just, I had one meal that I ate all the time. It was so good, and it was so nourishing, and I just ate that all the time. But I call it my campaign meal. It was a can of Rayos, or a jar of Rayo spaghetti sauce mixed with like 2 pounds of ground beef, and then I would just eat that out of a bowl. It was so good, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But you know, it was so my feeling good became the top priority. And so when I hear people talk about the stress at work and this and that, you know, I'm kind of like, your boss is not going to die for you, not going to get sick for you, none of that. So are you going to give like years of your life, you know, munching on all of this stuff because you're stressed out and you want to yell and this and that and whatever? Like, what's the point of that? You know, at the end of the day, you're the one who is going to suffer, and your boss doesn't care anything about it. So don't tell me about, like, you know, eating all this stuff. Like, that doesn't do anything for you. So you got to let that go.
Exactly. Right before I started my keto journey, one of the things that actually happened to me was I had a coworker pass away at my job, at my corporate job. And literally at the meeting where they announced her death, 10 seconds later, our head shed gets on the line and says, well, if you had a meeting scheduled with the individual, just put a pin in it. We will get somebody in her position to answer your questions or whatever. And it just struck me that, you know what, they literally just told us this woman died. Like, I've got to start taking better care of myself here, because these people do not care, no matter how good a job I do. At the end of the day, if I pass away, they're just waiting to get somebody in the door. Yeah. And so again, just to your point, you know, making sure that we make ourselves and our health a priority, and that's not being selfish. You know, a lot of people like to, you know, my husband, I get a lot of married clients whose spouses may not be on board. And so they say, you know, my husband doesn't think that I should spend the money on some of the products. And I'm like, you know, this is not being selfish. In fact, it would probably help your husband out as well, because there's so many dishes that we can make that are not, that, you know, your family wouldn't know the difference unless you told them, because, you know, the Rouse and the Mere Glenn's pasta sauces and stuff like that, I love them, and I make dishes, and nobody in this house knows what, you know, they just, oh, this is good, you know? Yeah. You know, and
and it's what spaghetti sauce used to be. I mean, it didn't used to be full of sugar. So, yeah.
Exactly. So it's a matter of, this is not selfish. This is self-care. And again, in fact, it can be family care if that is your situation. You know, it really makes me sad when folks come to me and they say, oh, you know what, I love it because you're so supportive and I wish that I had somebody else in my life. And I'm like, you know, again, it's that stigma of diet food and, oh, you know, you have to take these products. And that's why I always stress, you do not have to buy any pills. You do not need exogenous ketones. You know, some people use them as a resource and I respect that. But me personally, I took exogenous ketones one whole time. And it was so, and the product was so disgusting. I said, you know
really?
what? My body will create ketones if I do right. So I'm just going to do right.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never done that. I never used them, so.
You don't need them. You don't need the pills, you know. Yeah, MCT oil is great. It's a really great resource, but it's not, again, it's not one of those things that's 100% necessary. Mm-hmm. I love MCT oil, but you know what? If you don't have an extra $13 to spend on a bottle of MCT oil or however much, you know, don't worry about it. Again, concentrate on getting those whole healthy sources of fats. Concentrate on making sure that you're eating the adequate amount of protein, not too much, not too little, and keeping those carbs low. You know, don't worry about all the broccoli. Nobody ever got fat eating broccoli. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know, please don't ask me about broccoli. And it's, again, that's one of those things where people ask you and you're like, what? We're not talking about broccoli here. We're talking about, you know, ramen noodles and stuff like that. You know, mm-hmm. Those are the things that, you know, we need to kind of get our people away from.
So what is your fasting protocol now? Like, what do you do?
Generally speaking, I do a 20-hour fast. I have a very small 4-ish hour window, depending on how I feel. There are some days where, you know, 16 hours does it. You know, I'm ready to eat at the 16-hour mark. And that generally tends to get dictated by what I ate the night before. The higher fat content of the food that I eat, the longer I generally can fast the next day. If I'm eating something like, one of my favorite go-to dishes is stuffed green peppers, chicken stuffed green peppers. I can eat that every single day. If there's nobody else in the house with me, I eat it all the time. But if I have to cook for someone, you know, then the dishes will kind of vary. But the higher the fat content, higher the fat, protein, and fiber content, the longer I can generally tend to go the next day. Mm-hmm. There are some days where I will do a 24, 36-hour fast, what have you. But generally speaking, I tend to keep it about 20 hours. I love autophagy is our friend. It keeps us looking young, keeps our skin glowy, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's super helpful. And it's one of the motivating factors sometimes when I'm a little hungry, not too hungry, but I could give up. But then I think to myself, you know, autophagy. Yeah. I want to keep that skin looking good. You know, I want to be Angela Bassett one day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I generally tend to keep it about a 20 plus hour fast, but about 24. So. Okay.
Wow, that's really impressive. So I think I'm trying to lose a little bit more weight. So for now, I want to do these longer fasts, and then later on. But after, you know, even after doing these longer fasts, I still have a hard time doing like one meal a day. I still find that, you know, I'm particularly hungry afterwards. So I just go with my appetite and I just eat, you know.
So what helps when you break your fasts, and, you know, this is definitely a piece of advice I give, is to break your fast with a higher fat and higher protein meal. You don't want to have a carb fat meal. Mm-hmm. So for me, breaking my fast, I usually break it with a cup of bone broth with a little tablespoon of butter, and I'm sipping while I'm cooking, because one of the things I used to love to do was to have a glass of wine and, you know, maybe some olives.
Oh my God, that would be terrible.
Or some bread. Because I love to cook. Yeah. So now having that bone broth will kind of settle my stomach a little bit. It's, you know, it helps to break the fast. And again, it helps to control that blood sugar response. Mm-hmm. So you're not immediately spiking your blood sugar. You're actually controlling it. You know, it's kind of at bay. Then I might, you know, after that, maybe wait an hour while I'm cooking my dinner or whatnot, have a salad, have my main meal. And sometimes I have a treat, right? Sometimes I will make like a keto friendly mousse, or I used to make keto cheesecakes and stuff like that. I don't do it a lot, but like the mud cakes and stuff like that, I might make one of those if I still got a little bit of room in my stomach. You know, if I'm still like, you know, I could go for something sweet, because sugar was a huge problem for me before keto. And so I'm really particular about that, about eating keto sweets. During the beginning of my journey, I went the first couple of months even without any sweets whatsoever. So when folks come into my 14-day boot camps, I generally do not even mention keto treats at all during those 14 days, because it's like, I want you guys to get the base down first, you know, before we start talking about treats and cheats and all of that. Now, of course, you know, the internet is the internet, and everybody follows 15 other folks, so they, you know, they've seen all of the pictures and all of that already. But you know, I even in my like guidebooks and things like that for my very beginners folks, I don't mention sweets at all, because it's like, for most of us, sugar is a huge problem. And so yeah.
I agree. For me, it was a problem. I lost all of my weight on keto, so on carnivore, I haven't really lost more weight. But on keto, I focused on having, my only sweet was a quarter of a cup of frozen blueberries with 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. And because I had no other sweets, that tasted sweet to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then later on, I allowed myself chocolate, and I would get like super, super expensive chocolate. So that, you know, if I ate the whole bar, then that's all I have for another 2 weeks, because I couldn't afford to buy more. But I would eat tiny little squares of it, and I would allow myself, well, over time, you know, the amount I allowed myself grew, and that's the kind of the problem with it. But, you know, most of my carbs were coming from chocolate, and then, you know, the rest was like nuts, wine, and a little bit of vegetables. And over time, I started to think, you know, this probably isn't that great, you know, because like you know, I'm like keto in name only, because you know, my vegetable sources are, you know, wine, nuts, and chocolate, and that's just not probably not great.
So yeah, I started out kind of in the same thread as you. I was doing heavy whipping cream with a little bit of cream cheese, and you know, maybe some fruit sprinkled on the top. I did, you know, the peanut butter cookies. So I did almond/peanut butter cookies, because I couldn't find a peanut butter that was satisfying. Because you know, it's, again, it takes a different palate to really taste natural food. When you're used to Jif that is full of sugar versus natural peanut butter that's peanut butter and peanuts, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, your palate has to get used to eating natural foods. And even when you're preparing vegetables, those fresh vegetables versus something in a can versus something that's frozen, you know, they're so... that's the thing I find fascinating about keto, and that's the thing that drives my desire to teach keto, is getting folks to understand and to appreciate food in its natural state. You know, because again, I grew up poor, and so canned veggies was what it is. And so you don't realize the texture of asparagus and how it's supposed to taste and how it's supposed to feel in your mouth versus canned asparagus, which whoever thought that was a good idea needs to be
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, you know, you're training kids to believe that asparagus is slimy and gross, when in fact, you know, you put a little bit of garlic, minced garlic, and some butter and in aluminum foil, and you throw it in the oven for a little bit or on the grill, and you get it out, and it's just, it's magnificent. It's delicious. But if we don't ever get that information out there, people just, you know, the belief is that it's, I'm not a fan. You know, I see all of those posts online on different Facebook groups of, you know, how picky are you? And, avocado, gross, because it's green. It's like, you haven't even tasted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, getting our kids, when they're young, getting them out there and exposed to the different flavors, the different textures of food, the smells sometimes. I had the blessing to be able to live overseas. And so my 2 children, when they were very young, you know, we were able to go to France. We traveled all over Europe. And so they had Oh, we're back. Okay. I just got a call
Uh-oh. Oh, you still there? Okay, there you go.
like right in the middle of that.
Oh, it's okay.
We had we had the opportunity to get them out there, expose them to some of the different cultures, some of the different foods, and they are really good eaters now. My youngest daughter, she's right here. She has no need to be keto. She's taller than me, rail thin, but she's a really good eater. And so again, exposing our kids to that, exposing ourselves to that, and in addition to what we already know and what we already have in our culture, I think is just, it is the key to being able to get folks to understand more about their health. And that to me is the most important thing. Again, representing our people, getting our folks out there, and and just, you know, living our best life. And we cannot do that if we are sick. We cannot do that if we are in pain.
Yeah.
So
it's scary, like how I feel like a whole generation, maybe even two generations, just lost in this, you know, in the way that we eat. And I don't know what our future holds as, you know, as a people, because I hardly ever see anybody who is, you know, slim and like in good shape now. And it's scary.
it is. You know, I have my oldest, she's already left the house, but I have one more at home, one high school junior.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go up to the school and you see these kids, and, you know, a lot of them are hyper developed. A lot of them they look older
Mm-hmm.
than their teenage years would imply. And it's like, my gosh, you know, this is what it's coming down to. And it's all about, you know, the images that we see in the media, the waist trainers.
No,
It's like
the first time I saw that, I was like, what is this?
What is this? And and you know, I'm not going to call out any particular products. I was just about to, but I'm not going to do that. But you know, the drinks, the potions, you rub this lotion on your stomach and you're going to have, you know.
Yeah.
I don't, and maybe because I grew up in the military. I joined right after my 18th birthday, and I never looked back. But it's like we have kind of poisoned our kids away from hard work,
Mm-hmm.
and away from not doing things the fast way. And you know, if you're out there and you're wearing the waist trainer, I'm not knocking you. I got one that I bought before. I tried everything. I have this drawer in my bedroom, in this thing, and it's full of like hydroxycut and.
Did you ever have the plastic workout suit?
Yes. I'm like, I think it might be in that closet behind. I had the plastic workout suit. I had the where you put the rub on your stomach, and then the saran wrap, and then the cellophane thing that you wrap, and then I put the suit on, and then I would go out in my neighborhood and walk. I mean, literally, I have tried everything, and nothing clicked until I learned how to eat real food. And so I beg and plead with people all the time. You don't need all of that stuff. And it makes me sad when I see people throwing their hard-earned money away, but then they'll tell me it's too expensive to eat real food. And I get it, right? I'm the same as you guys. I go to the grocery store and I'm like, man, you know, why does sugarless or you know, no sugar added spaghetti sauce cost $5 a jar when ragu is 89 cents on sale? You know, that's not fair.
Yeah.
But again, if you're going to go out here and spend, I don't even know how much, you know, a good waist trainer costs, but I imagine it probably costs more than $8. So, you know, instead of doing that, guys, go to the grocery store. I got, you know, there's plenty of resources out there. I know a few other folks out there that actually, we give away free information all the time on what kind of foods to buy, you know, what kind of recipes to make, stuff like that. So you don't have to waste your money.
But I don't think that, you know, eating real food is all that expensive. I mean, I'm typically not buying grass-fed or anything like that. And it doesn't have to be, you know, overwhelming. And I think about how much less I'm spending, you know, at fast food, at restaurants, or just every day at 3 o'clock going to get, you know, some nuts or chocolate bar or this or that, you know, all of that stuff adds up. So when I take all of that and I spend it, I mean, I would say at the bare minimum, I break even, you know, once I went keto. And then, but, you know, as carnivore, like, actually my bills have really just dropped. And so, you know, And now I'm buying the cuts that are, you know, really crazy. I bought pig trotters so I can make some really thick bone broth, you know, so it gets really gelatinous. And
I'm like, yes,
you know,
girl.
instead of going to buy, you know, some of that collagen powder